Welcome back to the show, everyone. As you can see, former CIA analyst, geopolitical commentator Larry Johnson is here with me to break down the latest developers. We begin with a shocking Iranian report. This comes from a military source close to Iran that says 7 are now dead on the USS Abraham Lincoln after a brawl occurred amongst crew members and their superiors. It broke out after the carrier spent months in the region, nearly 1 year and 200 plus days without port. Now, U.S. sources are saying something different. The Military Times are saying that multiple crew members on the USS Abraham Lincoln have tried to go overboard, indicating a severe mental health crisis that families have made superiors in the U.S. Navy aware of, but has received zero attention from the Trump administration. Now, in other news, the United States and Iran are reportedly, supposedly from Pakistani mediators, agreeing to extend a so-called 60-day ceasefire brokered by Pakistan, with the current agreement supposedly ending August 17th. But Iran has actually rejected these reports outright, saying no such ceasefire exists because the MOU is not being abided by at this time and is essentially dead. Donald Trump today, instead of addressing the naval crisis or this, he has taken to Truth Social saying that the United States controls the Strait of Hormuz and will keep it. Saying Iran is completely defeated, has no money, has no troops, has no military. Larry, let's begin with what's happening aboard the USS Lincoln. What do you make of these reports? Oftentimes in this war, there's always been two conflicting truths. Now, a lot of families are saying it's hard to get information on off board the USS Lincoln right now. What's your understanding of what's going on, and what do you make of these two reports that have come out from the Iranian side and from the U.S. side?
There is a crisis in the U.S. military, but particularly in the U.S. Navy. I received a friend of mine, recently retired officer, and he sent me the following today. He was just, he was sort of livid. He says, with respect to this reported incident, he said, and finally the truth. This is making the rounds. If the Lincoln has 5,000 people on it, and it hasn't seen land in 38 weeks, they are starving, no packages, rationing coffee, waiting to die. They say the number is 6 attempts. Nearly a year at sea, no land, etc. The real number of attempts is likely 5-fold or 10-fold. In other words, 30 to 60. You have more attempts on a normal carrier operation. It's just normal, a factor of statistics. That's before being sent to your death on a purely political mission from someone who openly hates military members being hurt or dying. 6 attempts sounds like a lot, but that number is way, way too small. As an officer, like them, I've had to do a number of Army Regulation 15-6 command investigations on soldiers committing suicide. All officers have. It's a normal function. A real and stable number, too. And that's why you're still in. They have no clue what's waiting for them the first night they return home for wherever, and they have time to spend alone thinking about it, alone with nothing to distract you except your only friends, Jim and Jack. You know, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, referring to whiskey. Did you know they do roving patrols on all Navy ships called fire guard? That term has become blanket use for all services. It means a rotating schedule to monitor the perimeter to make sure there are no, quote, fires. Wrong. The guard is to prevent people from themselves on the spot, not dissimilar to phone factories in China. Fire guard still happens today. In the Army basic training, when you go to the field, when you go on an exercise or deployment, etc., it has nothing to do with preventing a fire. It's part of the daily life in the military. Here's another example. In the big units, such as the 82nd Airborne, the 101st Airborne, If the unit makes 82 or 101 days without a DUI, everybody gets a 4-day weekend. Well, they never got over 3 weeks without one regularly. So they had to increase the denominator to suicides. Everyone gets a long weekend if we make it to 82 days without a own unit. Guess how many days off there were? None. So we had to change the denominator again. Honestly, I think it was actually drugs. We may have made it to 82 days without someone caught and charged with using drugs in the barracks or whatever. Couldn't make it to 82 days without a DUI or a suicide. And then he goes on to describe, mentions his age when he was born. And he says, I've had 24 years of PTSD from actually killed West in those days, of divorces, a few attempts, mostly big wave surfing in Hawaii we don't really expect to come back in. Granted, I was enlisted in the invasion of Iraq then, but then I attended West Point, and that started an entire successful officer career after that, including more combat deployments. As I've mentioned before, I'm the class president of my West Point class and have been for several years. And so I have the numbers from day one of West Point until now. Committing at West Point is very regular. The preferred method, since everyone is in pretty good shape and runs a lot, is a run to Bear Mountain Bridge and then jumping. We had at least 5 commits while I was there. And keep in mind, you can just quit and go home for the most part. And then we lost some in combat, particularly in 2009, 2012, when everything heated up again, post-surge, etc. But we've lost many more due to suicide as officers with families. You know what one more of the fun decisions I get to make as the class president? Where do we place their names? How do they get bend or placed on the board? We have 3 demographics of dead classmates: combat, suicide, or non-combat injuries. I get to listen to and deal with every single one of my dead classmates' families argue about should their names be on the list of fallen in combat, if the majority while deployed in combat, shortly after coming home from combat, or many years later. You can imagine how emotional those conversations are. So 6 of 5,000 in a tinderbox of rage called the Abraham Lincoln, frustration and waiting for death for an multiply by 5 minimum. Then they end up just telling direct line supervisors, if you're sailor or self, it's on you.
Wow.
How's that?
Wow. Now that is indicative of a major crisis. And Larry, the United States, Trump administration, they made this a naval war. They said that the Trump administration has relied so deeply, not just in the Iran war, but every single theater, Cuba, Venezuela, so deeply on the U.S. Navy. Now with Iran, there's absolutely the oil markets are reflecting this. What Iran is saying is reflecting this. There's no end to this war right now in sight. So what does this mean then moving forward, given that these problems that are arising on the USS Lincoln, they have consequences even beyond the horrific personal consequences for those on board? Yeah, no, it is. Well, it's a failure of leadership from the top. Failure by Trump, failure by Pete Hegseth, failure by Admiral Brad Cooper, failure by the Chief of Naval Operations, failure by the Secretary of the Navy. Like I said, failure across the board. Yeah, definitely total failure. What do you make of Iran's report that they said, do you believe that there could also be, of course, the anguish that these sailors are going through that lead to self-harm and self-injury, certainly verified now. But Do you believe that there could be some kind of also confrontations and clashes happening on the ship as things get incredibly dire and dangerous in this manner?
Absolutely. It's not out there. I mean, you're dealing with 5,000 people. It's not one big happy family. They're going to be there's. I'm sure you've been in situations where a group of people, and there may be some people you just don't get along with. And then when you get under this kind of pressure, both the physical shortages, lack of food, lack of sleep, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd actually had some outbreaks of violence. This is bad.
Yeah, that's what Iran is saying. Nobody else is reporting it. Nobody else wants to pick up the story, but Iran is saying that they have been informed that there was violent clashes on the ship this past week. But Larry, what are some of the other consequences too? Because the USS Lincoln is supposed to be one of course, the few aircraft carriers that the U.S. has in its possession that make up the real heavyweight strength of the U.S. Navy. But being out in the Indian Ocean area that long also has some military effects and also technical effects on a ship like that, doesn't it? Like what do you believe the condition of the actual ship is, and is it even able to, hell, if you don't have crew ready to fight, then that's a whole big issue. But what about the ship itself?
Well, it's not so much the ship. I mean, the physical plant on the ship, it's just going to require more maintenance. It's just like anything that's mechanical with a lot of use. The maintenance is going to be critical. Then you've got the aircraft on board the carriers. And the F-35 is a hangar queen to start with. A plane that needs lots of extra special care and can, frankly, not be not be readily operational. They've got that to deal with. But it's not just the aircraft carrier. So, as I've mentioned in other broadcasts, I was contacted by the mother of one sailor now 3 weeks ago. And he was on the USS Tripoli. And she was furious and she's a former enlisted person in the Navy, I think, as well. She said her son lost 30 pounds. He came home gaunt. When you got a normal 21, 22-year-old kid who's not a fat body, and they don't necessarily have 30 pounds to lose, but that's what he did. I can show you a picture of me back when I was 22, going on 23. I was 23, and I got amoebic dysentery in Honduras, and I lost like 25 pounds. And, I was never even that skinny in high school, so that's what the food was awful, but it wasn't just the food. And she sent, I had photographs, I had text messages, email messages between mother and son. So this wasn't just a fabrication. She was reporting real life. Well, then last week ago, Saturday in Chattanooga at Robert Barnes' conference, which I was privileged to participate in, I met the mother of a Marine. And she began talking about her son had just come off deployment. And I mentioned, was it food an issue? And she said, oh, my God, was it an issue? And she launched into a tirade about how bad the conditions were on board, I think it was the Boxer. So you've now got the parents of the Abraham Lincoln carrier who had a meeting last Thursday, I believe, in San Diego with the Secretary of the Navy. And boy, they lit him up like a Christmas tree. They were so angry. So, what we're looking at here is a complete breakdown in the leadership, the logistics, the support for these sailors and Marines that are on board these ships.
Now, what do you? I'm sure. I mean, I was hearing in some of these reports, like in Stars and Stripes and Military Times, that it's actually quite hard to get information from what's happening on the ship unless they're getting it directly, even from some who had to save some of these sailors from actually jumping overboard. Uh, what do you make then of how people, especially families of these sailors and crew members, are feeling about the reports that there are consistently across the board, there's no continuity in the message about what's happening with the war. Iran is saying absolutely no ceasefire. The war is going to continue. Iran is saying they're going to continue going until 2029. They haven't even met all their objectives yet. Well, the Trump administration through Pakistan is trying to say that there's a ceasefire that's going to last 60 days. But what does this even mean to those who are responsible now for delegating this war and for conducting it under the current conditions of it, which are quite ambiguous to say the least? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, you're going to fight a war, you got to have an objective. What's the objective? That's what Trump has failed to define. And so now they've got these people stuck in a hole. What is their mission? Okay, so they're running a blockade. Well, they don't have enough ships to actually fully blockade the Indian Ocean. They can stop an occasional ship, but even if they stop that ship, are they going to take control of it? If they have to take control of it, you have to detail a ship to sail with it. We don't have an unlimited fleet by any stretch. We're extremely constrained. So, and it's a haphazard. You know, they're stopping some and not stopping the others. So this is, and then you get Trump's declaration, like his Truth Social today, to say, we got full control of the Strait of Hormuz. Really? Well, then, and so the shutdown, the global shutdown of liquid natural gas, helium, urea, and sulfur, and oil, that's the fault of Donald Trump? Okay, that's what he's admitting. He shut it down. But then in another breath, he'll claim, "Oh no, it's open. Strait of Hormuz is open. We control it." Really? Then why aren't there any ships coming out? So it's just one lie upon another. That's the problem.
Yeah, maybe you can help explain too what it means. All the ships that are actually coming out of the Strait of Hormuz are going through the Iranian controlled, or what it's being called, Iranian delegated corridor. None through that so-called Omani corridor. What does that effectively mean, and how does it contradict the statements that Trump made today, which appear as, according to Iranian sources, they're saying that it's just simply market manipulation and there's no reality to it? But what does it mean for the only ships that come out to be coming through Iranian-controlled areas?
Well, Iran made it very clear. I guess it was end of April or 1st of May when they introduced the Persian Gulf Strait Authority protocols. And they said they created a website. They created an online forms that you fill out. So if you're a ship contemplating going through the Strait of Hormuz, you've got to provide the Iranians with name of the ship, country of that flags the ship, name of the captain, destination of the ship, the cargo on board the ship, and the sixth and last thing is the nationalities of the sailors on board the ship. And essentially, what Iran is doing is to make sure that no ship aligned with Israel is coming through the strait. It's a form of a blockade. But they're also wanting to use that as a way to raise money for Iran. They're going to charge a fee in order to enter the strait. Now, it remains to be seen the negotiations with Oman. They'll say, okay, we'll put a toll or tax on every ship that comes in, And then what you do with them leaving, that's your choice. You can charge them, you cannot charge them, but we're going to collect our money up front. So that'll put Oman, it'll put Oman in a fairly unique position to either let them all go without a charge or to get in on the money. Said, hey, there's you're going to have to pay a user's fee here. So, a lot of that is still up in the air to be, as far as what Oman's official role is going to be. The reports are that Iran and Oman have had positive talks, but we've seen no firm agreement and no final announcement.
Yeah, it's been taking quite a while. It feels like it's been a while since we heard those initial reports that it's very close, the Iran-Oman technical talks. Nothing yet, and doesn't look like it's going to happen today, tomorrow. Larry, help interpret what this means then, because this was reported yesterday that lowest in 40 years, the U.S. strategic petroleum reserves are currently sitting.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for this war? Because Donald Trump has said he's going to be relying now, low-keying it, relying on economic pressure of Iran. But what kind of economic pressure does this place on the U.S. and the world economy, given that this situation isn't set to get better so long as everything about the war, other than the strikes, remains in place?
We're on the edge of catastrophe. So let's understand that I guess now the number's down to around 290 million barrels. Is that the number you're seeing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me pull it back up, actually. This, boom. Yep. About 30. It says, I think this was a 300 about.
No, it's got to be less than 300 now. It was 300 a few weeks ago. So of that 290, you've got to keep 145 million barrels minimum in the caverns, in the salt caverns, total. Each salt cavern is going to have a different level depending upon its volume, what it's capable of holding. But the reason you've got to keep, roughly now 50% of what's left in storage is if you pump it out. The only way you can pump it out is you have to pump water in, and oil's lighter than water, so the oil rides on the water to the top, and then the oil's sucked out. But the problem is with all that water, and if you're basically draining the last drop, you're going to create a crisis, a structural crisis for the salt cavern. The water mixes with the salt, weakens the wall, the salt cavern collapses in on itself, and then you no longer have a salt cavern to store that in. That's number one. Number two, of that oil that's being drawn out, I'm not sure what the mixture is between sweet crude and sour crude. The U.S. refineries, particularly in the Gulf, 70% of the U.S. refineries across the country are set up to deal with sour crude, heavy crude. That means it's high in sulfur content. And these refineries, they're built to handle particular types of oil. All oil is not created equal. It differs. So depending upon what percent of that oil, the 145 million barrels that draw out, what percent of that goes to diesel and aviation fuel? So you now have a global shortage of diesel and aviation fuel because previously, when the oil was flowing from the Persian Gulf at the rate of about 20 million barrels per day, about 2 million of those barrels would make their way to the United States to be processed. Now, 2 million barrels may not sound like a lot, but it is still almost 10%. So it's not inconsequential. But then the other refineries that were getting that oil out of the Persian Gulf were one's in India, or an area in India, The other's in China. And the fourth one, after US, India, China, was Japan and South Korea. They get 90% of theirs out of there. So there now is a genuine shortage of diesel and aviation fuel, which means the price of it's climbing and going to continue to climb. So we're on the cusp of a genuine world economic crisis.
Past this graveyard.
Yeah.
This is what Iran is reporting. The Persian Gulf Strait Authority denies U.S. claims that the Strait of Hormuz is open, will not be reopened until conditions are accepted. And here's the numbers of what they are saying is occurring in terms of number of ships, but all of these ships are being approved of by Iran through their channel. And so, Larry, what does it mean to be approved of from their channel? Is Iran taking fees right now? Iran reported that they've lost quite a lot of money from the blockade in many respects. Are they recouping this from the Strait of Hormuz? What's going on there?
To my knowledge, not yet. When it comes time to collect funds, the money's going to be collected in Chinese renminbi or the yuan. So it'll be Chinese currency going into banks connected to China, out of the reach of the United States. So the United States can no longer seize Iranian assets or steal Iranian money. Yeah. Well,
that's a game changer. I'm wondering, Larry, maybe talk about, because they put up the Bab el-Mandeb Strait there as well. Any updates on the situation now with Yemen? Surprise attack happened in the last 24 hours on Saudi forces. Yemen has been pounding Saudi positions inside of Yemen, supportive of the so-called southern government. And I'm wondering if you could give an update on what's happening there and why is that situation escalating, despite the fact that the Trump administration is trying to at least put the Iran war on some kind of ambiguous pause, as it is, or as they're trying to do now.
There are some fundamental truths in life. You hear about, like, if you're in a hole, first rule of crisis management, if you're in a hole, stop digging. And the Saudis forgot sort of corollary to that is, like, if you live in a glass house, don't get in a rock fight with a guy that lives in a quarry and has a brick house, okay? Because they got plenty of rocks to throw. And that's the mistake that the Saudis have made in going after the Houthis. The Saudi has a rich number of targets that are sensitive economically, and that if hit or destroyed, can make Saudi life very, very difficult. Really hurt the economy. But the Houthis, by contrast, they don't have a lot of infrastructure. So just dropping bombs on Houthi land isn't going to get you anywhere. So this is a case where the Saudis decided to pick a fight that they can't win. And like I said, if you're in a glass house, don't go throwing rocks. You're just setting yourself up.
And how would you consider, in terms of this regional war, Larry, how would you see this going if it continues on in this manner? What is the fate then of Saudi Arabia? The UAE, I saw reports from certain geopolitical analysts saying the UAE and Israel now are in some kind of alliance, so to speak. We have the Middle East, the new pact in the Middle East between Turkey, Pakistan, as well as Saudi Arabia. What do you make of all this shuffling, and what does it portend for the regional situation as Iran, Yemen, and the various flashpoints begin to take shape in their outcomes?
Yeah. There's, Meg Ryan and her partner, they've been in a relationship for, good God, 40 5 years, 40 years, never been married. Well, I draw that as a parallel to Israel and the UAE. They're just announcing their relationship. For God's sake, it's been in place for 20 years or more? So, it's laughable. Oh, they've got an alliance. Well,